The heavy door rested upon the long workbench in the center of the workshop, occupying almost all available space. It was a piece of solid wood, ancient and worn by time, its surface covered by an opaque layer of accumulated dust and marks of neglect. Its edges were parched, showing small splinters that detached at the slightest touch, and the wood's original color had been lost beneath a lifeless gray tone. In one of the lower corners, the structure yielded slightly, revealing a gap where the pieces no longer fit firmly together. The iron hinges, still attached to the side, showed deep rust stains, rigid and immobile after years of oblivion. There was a silent imbalance in that piece, a sense of interrupted purpose that filled the workshop's illuminated space. Perhaps this is just one of those tranquil stories, made for quiet relaxation. And sometimes that's all we truly need. Matias paused before the table, observing the door with a careful, lingering gaze. He ran his calloused hand over the rough surface, feeling the uneven texture and the cold of the forgotten wood. The touch revealed the resilience still dwelling within that structure, a dormant strength beneath the layer of neglect. In that moment, the carpenter decided to restore dignity to that piece. He would not let it crumble away. That very night, he would begin the work of removing the marks of time, of healing the wood's wounds, and restoring the function for which the door had been created. The commitment was sealed in the workshop's silence, a promise of transformation that would begin with his own hands. The workshop was a refuge of yellow light and warmth, a space where the scent of sawdust and resin permeated the air. Outside the gridded glass windows, the winter night stretched cold and silent. Snowflakes fell in a slow, steady rhythm, covering the yard ground with a white blanket that softened the world's contours. The cold tried to press against the glass panes, but the warmth from the wood-burning stove in the corner of the workshop kept the space cozy and secure. The carpenter walked to the stove, opening the small iron door to add 2 more pieces of firewood. The flames immediately licked the dry bark, crackling with a lively sound that contrasted with the snow's silence outside. Warmth radiated through the space, heating the man's face and relaxing his shoulders. He closed the iron door with a metallic click and returned to the workbench. The light of the hanging lamp on the ceiling cast soft shadows over the old door's reliefs, highlighting every imperfection that needed care. Matias took a deep breath, sensing the aroma of warmed air mixed with the scent of dry earth emanating from the door. He adjusted the thick fabric apron around his body, tying the straps at his back with habitual movements. The body's preparation accompanied the mind's preparation. He looked at the row of tools organized on the plank wall, each in its place, waiting to be used. The night would be long, cradled by the invisible fall of snow and the meticulous work awaiting him. The door, lying on the table, seemed ready to receive the first touch of restoration. The work began with the removal of the old hardware still clinging to the wood. Matias chose a flat-tipped tool with a polished wooden handle, heavy enough to tackle screws seized by time. He leaned over the first hinge, positioning the metallic tip in the slot of a darkened screw. The rust had fused the metal to the wood, creating a stubborn resistance. The man braced his feet on the plank floor and applied constant pressure, turning the handle slowly. A dry creak echoed through the workshop, followed by the sound of small rust fragments breaking free. The screw yielded millimeter by millimeter. With each turn, an orange powder fell onto the table, marking the effort of removal. Matias repeated the process for each fastener, feeling the tension in his forearm muscles and the smooth texture of the tool handle in his palm. When the last screw was removed, he placed the small pieces into an enameled metal bowl. The metallic sound of the screws dropping into the container rang clear and precise. Then he pulled the entire hinge. It detached with a muffled snap, leaving behind a rectangular mark on the wood where the original color, a deep brown, still remained preserved, protected from light and air for decades. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thickening the white layer on the windowsill. The winter silence seemed to deepen, making the sounds inside the workshop even sharper. The carpenter picked up the large iron doorknob, which was also covered by a rough crust. The screws for this piece were larger and required a broader movement of his shoulders. He worked with patience, without forcing beyond the old metal's limit, until the doorknob detached into his hand. It was heavy, cold, and smelled of ancient iron and dampness. He gently placed it beside the bowl of screws, freeing the door of all its metallic appendages. With the surface clear, it was time to clean the accumulated dust. Matias picked up a hard bristled brush and began to sweep the wood from end to end. His arm's movement was rhythmic, a constant back and forth that raised small clouds of grayish dust. With each pass of the brush, the superficial layer of grime disappeared, revealing the wide grains and marks of use the door had accumulated throughout its history. The scent of old dust filled the air for a few moments, soon drawn away by the current of heat rising from the wood-burning stove. Matias paused to wipe his face with a clean cloth, feeling the tranquil breath in his chest. He ran his bare hand over the newly brushed wood. The roughness was still there, but the feeling of abandonment had vanished. The door was now a clean canvas, ready to be mended. He noticed how the lamp's light reflected differently on the now dust-free surface, showing the natural undulations of the tree's original cut. The cold outside seemed distant, contained beyond the window glass. The accumulated snow began to form small dunes in the yard, visible only when the gentle wind moved the flakes beneath the faint light escaping the workshop. Matias walked around the table, inspecting every corner of the clean door. He looked for cracks, for parts where the wood had yielded to dampness or weight. His attentive gaze swept across the main plank's expanse, assessing what would need reinforcement before beauty could be restored. The cleaning had revealed the piece's truth, its weaknesses, and its resident strength. He took a lightly dampened cloth and wiped it over the dark mark where the doorknob used to be. The dampness made the wood's color leap to the eye for a brief instant, a rich, warm tone that promised to soon return. The air evaporated quickly in the warmed environment, leaving the surface matte once more. The carpenter folded the cloth and placed it in his apron's pocket. The first step was complete. The door breathed without the weight of grime and rusted metal. The around atmosphere seemed to approve of the progress, maintaining the soft crackle of firewood and the cozy quietude that embraced the meticulous work. The man's attention turned to the door's lower corner where the structure was compromised. A long crack separated the side plank from the central panel, creating a gap through which the workshop light passed freely. The original joints had shrunk with years of drying, losing the firmness that held the piece together. Matias ran his index finger along the fissure, feeling the uneven edges and loose.
He would need to fill that void and stabilize the wood before proceeding. He walked to a basket of wood scraps at the back of the workshop and chose a piece of light oak with straight grains and dense texture. Returning to the table, he measured the crack's width and depth using a small sliding metal instrument. With the numbers in mind, he clamped the piece of oak in a workbench vise. The iron mechanism tightened around the wood with a firm creak, holding it immobile. Matias picked up a fine-toothed saw and began to cut. The sound of the saw cutting the new wood was sharp and musical, unlike the dry scrape of the brush before. The carpenter's arm movement was fluid, using his own body's weight to guide the blade. A fine shower of light sawdust fell to the floor, mixing with the shadows cast by the light. The fresh scent of freshly cut wood rose up through the air, a sweet and vibrant aroma that contrasted with the aged scent of the door on the table. The snow outside continued its silent dance, the flakes tapping lightly against the window glass like small touches of cotton. With the piece cut to approximate size, Matias took a sharp-bladed tool with a short handle. He began to pare down the sides of the oak piece, creating a wedge shape, thinner at one end and wider at the other. Thin wood shaves curled as they left the blade, falling onto the workbench like small golden curls. He worked calmly, testing the wedge's fit in the door crack several times, adjusting the thickness with precise and delicate cuts. The sensation of the blade cutting the wood grain transferred a soft vibration to the man's hand, a tactile communication of resistance and form. When the wedge fit perfectly, filling the fissure without forcing the old sides, Matias prepared the glue. He used a small, soft bristled brush to spread a thick, yellowish liquid inside the crack and over the new wedge's surfaces. The glue had a slightly acidic smell, which soon dissipated in the warm workshop air. He inserted the thin tip of the wedge into the gap and, with a solid wood hammer, began to tap on the wider end. The hammer blows were controlled and rhythmic. The hollow sound of wood striking wood echoed through the workshop walls. With each tap, the wedge descended a little further, spreading excess glue along the edges. Matias felt the resistance increase as the piece settled into its definitive place, joining the separated parts with firm pressure. When the sound of the tap changed, becoming denser and duller, he knew the wedge had reached the bottom. The fissure was completely filled, and the door's structure regained its integrity. He took a damp cloth and carefully wiped away the glue that had seeped onto the surface. The contrast between the wedge's light wood and the door's dark, aged wood was evident, like a fresh scar on old skin. With a small, flexible saw, he cut off the part of the wedge that protruded from the surface, leveling the new wood with the old. The carpenter ran his hand over the repair. It was smooth, firm, and continuous. The door's corner, once fragile and loose, was now solid under his touch. The weakness had been healed with patience and precision, leaving the piece ready to once again bear the weight of its own movement. The warmth from the wood-burning stove continued to embrace the environment, drying the glue's dampness and bringing a sense of comfort to the completed work. With the structure firm, the next step required patience and continuous effort. The door's surface still carried the remnants of an old varnish, now crackled and transformed into small dried scales that hid the wood's true color. Matias picked up a rectangular cork block and wrapped it with a piece of rough sandpaper. He positioned his hands over the block, feeling the granular texture beneath his fingers, and pressed the tool against the door's upper edge. The first back and forth movement produced a rough, dragging sound.
The immediate friction broke the thin layer of old varnish, transforming it into a fine whitish powder. Matias established a steady rhythm. The scraping sound filled the workshop, a dry noise that rose and fell in intensity as the man's arms moved back and forth. The physical effort generated an internal warmth, making Matias loosen his apron straps a little. Dust began to accumulate on the table and float in the lamp-lit air, creating small, visible beams of light. As each pass of the rough block, the door revealed a little more of its essence. The gray and opaque color gave way to a light brown tone, showing the natural patterns formed by the tree's growth. Matias watched the curved lines of the grains appear like rivers on an ancient map. He wiped the surface with his hand from time to time, feeling the tactile transformation. What was once uneven and flaking became progressively smooth and uniform. The rustic touch of the raw wood was warm and inviting. The work of leveling the surface required attention to detail. In the areas around the central panels, where the wood formed small steps and moldings, the large block couldn't reach. Matias folded a smaller piece of rough sandpaper and used only his fingertips to reach the corners. The movement became short and precise. The sound shifted to a soft hiss. He felt the wood's pressure against his fingertips, guiding the abrasion just enough to clean without altering the original shape of the reliefs. The scent of powdered varnish mingled with the deep aroma of exposed wood. It was a sweet and earthy smell, reminding of dense forests and dry leaves. Outside the workshop, the snow continued to fall, now more densely. The yard's whiteness reflected the window light, creating a soft glow that tried to invade the space. The contrast between the extreme cold beyond the glass and the light sweat on the carpenter's forehead made the internal space even more protected and isolated. The world seemed to have stopped, reduced only to the size of that workbench and the constant sound of friction. After traversing the entire length of the door with the coarser sandpaper, Matias changed the block's material. He chose a sheet with very fine grains, almost soft to the touch. The goal now was no longer to remove material, but to polish the wood, close the wood's pores, and prepare it to receive nourishment. The new movement over the door produced a velvety sound, a long, continuous whisper. The resistance lessened, and the block slid easily over the light brown. The wood responded to the polishing by acquiring a matte and natural sheen. Matias ran the palm of his hand over the central panel. The texture was similar to a stone polished by a river water, cold for the first few seconds, but soon absorbing the skin's warmth. There were no more splinters, no more roughness. The repair scar in the lower corner had blended perfectly with the rest of the piece, visible only by the color difference, but imperceptible to the touch. The carpenter took a clean, dry cloth and vigorously shook it over the door, expelling the last layer of fine dust. The surface was clean, smooth, and exposed, breathing the warm workshop air, ready for the transformation that would follow.
The wood was raw, leveled, and thirsty. Matias walked to a small shelf leaning against the brick wall and picked up a round metal can. As he opened the lid with a small snap, the rich, dense aroma of linseed oil and natural beeswax invaded the air. It was a nourishing, heavy, and comforting scent.
which quickly overlaid the dry odor of dust and sawdust. He brought the can near the table and took a piece of soft cotton fabric, already yellowed from previous use. The carpenter dipped the tip of the fabric into the translucent paste inside the can. The wax had a soft texture, yielding easily to the pressure of his fingers. He positioned the cloth over the door's upper corner and began to apply the product with circular, broad movements. The effect was immediate. As soon as the mixture touched the smooth surface, the wood absorbed the moisture. The light brown color instantly transformed into a dark, deep, and vibrant tone. The wood grains, once subtle, leapt into view with strong contrasts of gold and dark brown. The sound of the cloth rubbing the wood was a soft, rhythmic murmur. Matias felt the liquid's texture penetrating the door's pores, creating a protective layer that brought the piece back to life. With each circle traced by the man's arm, a new area of the door awakened. The contrast between the already treated part, rich and gleaming, and the still raw part, pale and opaque, was visual proof of the recovery. He advanced slowly, ensuring that every millimeter received the same amount of oil and wax. The work required no force, only constancy and care. The warmth of the environment helped soften the wax, making application easier. The reflection of the hanging lamp began to gleam on the newly treated surface, following the movement of Matias's hands. The sweet scent of beeswax filled Matias's lungs with each breath, bringing a sense of calm and completeness. The door drank the oil quickly, like dry earth receiving the first rain after a long drought. He dedicated special attention to the reliefs and the panel moldings. With his fingertips wrapped in the damp cloth, he massaged the oil into the curves and the more difficult corners. The wood there seemed to absorb even more of the product, darkening intensely. The light oak patch in the lower corner also received its share. The oil highlighted the difference in the woods, transforming what was a fault into a mark of history and resilience. The piece gained character, displaying its marks with pride, protected by a warm sheen. Outside, the snow fell with a hypnotic slowness, visible through the glass fogged at the corners by the temperature difference. The winter night silence enveloped the workshop, isolating the man and his work in a bubble of suspended time. The only sound was the continuous glide of the cotton on the solid wood. Matias finished applying the first layer across the entire length of the door. He stepped back and observed. The entire piece seemed to pulse under the yellow light, rich in colors and textures. He waited a few minutes, letting the wood absorb as much as possible. The warmth from the wood-burning stove aided the process, slowly drying the surface. Then he took a second cloth, clean and completely dry. With long, firm movements, he began to polish the door, removing the excess wax that hadn't been absorbed. The friction of the dry cloth against the wax generated a subtle warmth and raised a satin sheen, soft to the eye and incredibly smooth to the touch. The door no longer looked like an old piece rescued from abandonment. It had regained the grandeur and warmth of its youth, ready to face new winters with renewed resilience. The wood was ready, but the door still needed its joints and its voice. On the auxiliary workbench, the iron hinges and doorknob rested in the enameled bowl, covered by years of oxidation and grime. Matias picked up the heavy doorknob. The metal was cold and rough, conveying the sense of abandonment that the door no longer possessed. He took a piece of fine steel wool and a small bottle of mineral oil. He let fall a few drops of the transparent liquid onto the dark iron and began to rub. The friction of the steel wool against the rusted metal produced a sharp, scratching sound, unlike all the sounds the wood had provided. It was a work of constant friction. The man applied pressure with his thumb, following the curves of the doorknob. The mineral oil mixed with the loose rust, forming a dark paste that stained his fingertips. Gradually, the rough crust yielded, revealing the original surface of the wrought iron. The metal didn't shine like silver. It displayed a matte graphite-colored sheen, dense and resilient. Matias wiped the doorknob with a thick cloth, removing the dark paste. The piece was now smooth and clean, with a weight that felt more solid in his hands. He repeated the process with the large hinges. Every corner of the metal was rubbed until the dark, clean color of the iron emerged. The metallic, sharp scent of polished iron floated in the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of beeswax emanating from the door. The old pieces had regained their dignity, ready to return to their place of origin. The moment arrived to unite the metal with the wood. The carpenter positioned the first hinge over the rectangular marking on the door's side. The fit was perfect, an exact return to the space molded decades ago. He took the original screws, which had also been cleaned and lightly lubricated, and inserted them into the holes. With a thick-handled screwdriver, he began to turn. The sound of the metal entering the treated wood was firm, a dull, continuous click with each turn. The screw met resistance, but advanced securely, anchoring the iron in the solid structure. With each screw tightened, the door gained more weight and function. Matias felt the final tension in the tool when the screw head aligned with the hinge surface, locking the piece in place. The connection was solid, without play. He moved the hinge with his hand. The metal turned smoothly, without the dry creaks of the past. The mineral oil had penetrated the joints, ensuring silent and fluid movement. The door was regaining its ability to open and close. He walked to the other side and positioned the doorknob. The dark iron base contrasted beautifully with the rich, dark wood. The larger screws required more force to be fastened. The man steadied his wrist and turned the wrench with determination. The sound of the final tightening echoed through the quiet workshop. He held the doorknob with his whole hand, testing its firmness. The piece didn't yield a millimeter. The sensation of the cold, smooth metal against the warm palm of his hand was the final touch of restoration. The winter silence outside remained unaltered, snow accumulating silently on the roof and tree branches. Inside the workshop, the tools rested on the table. Matias ran a clean cloth over the newly installed hardware, removing any finger marks. The contrast between the vibrant brown of the waxed wood and the deep graphite of polished iron created a visual harmony of strength and care. The door was complete. All its parts, once separated by wear and time, now formed a single functional body, united by the silent effort of that night.
The door was ready, but lying on the table, it was still just an object at rest. To understand the result of his work, the carpenter needed to see it in its natural position. Matias positioned himself at the table's edge. He held the side edges of the solid wood, feeling the firm thickness beneath his fingers. With a continuous movement,
and using the strength of his legs, he lifted the piece. The weight was considerable, gravity pulling the dense wood and solid iron downwards, but he kept it balanced. He took short steps backwards, sliding the door off the table, and rested it on the workshop's plank floor. The soft impact produced a deep sound that reverberated through the wooden floor. Matias tilted the door slightly backwards, leaning it against the exposed brick wall near the wood-burning stove. He slowly released his hands, ensuring the piece was stable. The change of perspective transformed the environment. The workbench, now empty, seemed immense, and the door, standing upright, assumed an imposing presence in the illuminated space. The man stepped back a few paces, crossed his arms, and observed. The yellow light of the hanging lamp bathed the wood from top to bottom. The dark grains of the oak meandered across the surface, gleaming softly thanks to the layer of wax. The dark iron hinges cast small, sharp shadows on the frame, and the doorknob rested firm, awaiting the touch of a hand. The scar in the lower corner, where the new wedge had been inserted, told the story of recovery without hiding the past. The door didn't look new, it looked eternal. It carried the weight of its age, but displayed the strength of something cared for and preserved. Matias approached slowly. He extended his hand and grasped the doorknob. The touch of the clean metal was comforting. He made the opening motion, turning the iron piece. The internal mechanism, now free of rust, responded with a soft mechanical click, a sound of precision that had been rescued from silence. He pulled the door gently toward him, testing its balance. Even leaning against the wall, the sensation of solidity was undeniable. It was a structure made to protect and welcome, to separate cold from warmth, noise from silence. The warmth from the wood-burning stove radiated through the environment, warming the carpenter's back as he contemplated the piece. The scent of wax, oil, and fresh wood still lingered in the air, a rich mixture that defined the workshop's essence. He imagined the place where that door would be installed. He imagined the sound it would make closing against the door frame, isolating the cold wind of a winter night like this. He imagined the hands that would touch that same doorknob every day, finding the same firmness and security he felt now. He ran his open hand over the central panel, feeling the smooth, satiny texture glide beneath his skin. The roughness, the dust, and abandonment had completely vanished. The wood was warm, absorbing the environment's heat. The transformation was concrete and tactile. The physical effort of the last few hours had dissolved into the beauty of that result. There was no rush, nothing more to be cut, sanded, or tightened. The imbalance that existed at the beginning of the night had been corrected. Outside, the snowstorm began to lose its strength. The flakes fell more sparsely, floating slowly before touching the white ground. The layer of snow on the windowsill had grown, blocking some of the cold and enhancing the cozy, isolated feeling of the workshop. The silence of the outside world was deep and peaceful, a mirror of the quietude that now inhabited the interior of the workspace. Matias remained standing before the door for a long time, just breathing the warm air and observing the wood's soft sheen. The work was finished, and the piece was ready to begin a new cycle of its existence. The night advanced into its deepest hours. Matias averted his gaze from the door leaning against the wall and began to tidy the workshop. His movements were slow and automatic, the rhythm of one completing a ritual. He gathered the tools from the table, wiping the tip of each screwdriver and the blade of each saw with a dry cloth before storing them in their proper places on the plank panel. The metallic sound of the tools touching the nails on the wall was clear and precise. He took a soft, bristled broom and began to sweep the floor. The light oak sawdust mingled with the gray powder of the old varnish and the small flakes of rust. The broom scraped the wooden floor with a continuous, rhythmic sound, gathering the remnants of the work into a small pile in the center of the space. Matias collected the dirt with a metal shovel and threw it into the disposal bucket. The floor became clean again, revealing the marks of use that the workshop itself carried. The wood-burning stove displayed only red, pulsing embers. Matias added no more wood. The residual warmth would be enough to keep the space protected until morning. He walked to the switch near the entrance and turned off the main light that hung from the ceiling. The workshop plunged into a soft gloom. The only illumination came from the faint glow of the embers and the pale light reflecting from the snow outside, entering through the gridded window. In this half-light, the newly restored door took shades of bronze and shadow. The wax's sheen reflected the faint red of the stove. Matias paused near the window, feeling the subtle cold radiating from the glass. He looked at the white-covered yard, untouched, peaceful. The physical fatigue in his shoulders was light and satisfying. He untied his apron, hanging it on a hook on the wall. The scent of treated wood was impregnated in the fabric and in the air. With a final look at the firm, silent structure leaning against the wall, he turned and left the workshop, closing his own door with care, leaving the work to rest in the quietude of the winter night.